Okay, so there have been a few questions about security settings in Zoom. So I thought I'd take a look at a few of them. And what better way to do that than in a Zoom recording? So here we are. The best way to find all of the settings related to security in one place is not to use the app itself, but to go to your account through the browser. So I'm going to launch that right now. First thing I'm going to do though is I'm going to share my screen. So there's my screen. And now I'm going to launch Google Chrome, good old Google Chrome. I'm going to go to Zoom. Okay. And it's going to take me to the US version of the Zoom site. And I'm going to sign in. Now you're going to see on the left-hand side, about the 5th item down under personal, you have settings. And we're just going to work our way down the settings. And all the settings we need to be aware of are in the meeting section. So no need to worry about recording or telephone. So let's start at the very beginning. Let's work our way down to whatever the first thing happens to be. First thing that's of any real importance related to security is join before host, as you can see right here. So what this does is it allows the participants to join a meeting before you as the host have arrived. By default, that is turned off. That is a higher level of security. It prevents people from just jumping on your meeting and just doing whatever the heck they do before you've arrived. So you have some control over that. So I would leave that as it is. Next item is to use the personal ID, your personal meeting ID when scheduling a meeting. Again, that's turned off by default. I personally like to turn it on because I like to have one link that I know will work for every meeting that I host, and that's what a PMI is. You always get the exact same URL and meeting ID if you turn that on. It's more convenient for me. I'm mostly working with adults, the same people over and over again. If you want a higher level of security, you want to leave that off, which is how it is by default. And that way it's going to generate a new URL and a new meeting ID every time you create a new meeting, either scheduling or with an instant meeting. That's the way it is by default. So I would leave that for security purposes. Next thing is only authenticated users can join meetings. That is turned off by default. So again, a level of security, if you want to make sure people have authenticated through Zoom, you're going to turn that on. I would say for people who have concerns about security, go ahead and turn that on, and then people will be required to sign into Zoom before they can join your meeting. Okay. Next one is require a password when scheduling new meetings. By default, that is turned on. Like I say, personally for me, I turn it off a lot. I think passwords are a pain in the butt, but leave them on if you want. And the same with instant meetings. Both scheduled and instant meetings by default will generate a password. And by default, a personal meeting does not require a password. So that might be something you might want to turn on if you want to use your PMI, but you want to require passwords for those kind of meetings. Okay, we'll put that back. Now, this is an important one to bear in mind. By default, the password for a meeting is embedded in the meeting link. Okay, so now let me show you what that means. If I go back down here, or actually I go up here, and I'm gonna just create a quick invitation. I'm gonna copy the invitation. Then I'm gonna go over here and I'm going to make a new email, and I'm gonna put that invitation in there. So as you'll notice right here, we have a meeting ID, we have a password, and we have a URL link. By default, if you've sent this out to your invitees and they click on that link, the password is already embedded within that link, so they're not going to be required to enter a password. I think that's a pretty nifty trick, and I think the level of security at that point is sufficient. They've already gotten the invitation. However, howsoever, if you are concerned about that. If you think that email might have leaked out elsewhere, or you're sending that to a bunch of people you don't know who they are, then you could turn that off. And what that means is now anybody, even people that are coming in with that URL that you've created, are going to be required to type that password in there. Okay. And then also by default, anybody who's joining only by phone, your Zoom meeting will not be required to have a password, even if it's a password protected meeting. And you can enable that if you want phone users to be required to have a password. Okay. All right, let's go down just a little bit here. I know encryption is a great buzzword for security, so you might look at that and go, oh, I better turn that on. Well, your meeting is already encrypted. It's already encrypted from your end device, your endpoint device, your laptop, phone, whatever it is, to the cloud. You're good. What this is specifically for is for H23 and SIP devices, and those are that's certain devices that are for voice over IP or different kind of telephony or video conferencing and so forth. So although that may jump out to you as being something you should turn on, honestly, it's not going to really make that much difference for most people, so I wouldn't worry so much about that. Now let's cut down a little bit further. This is another one that I identified that I thought would be a good one to turn on if you want to increase your levels of security. So what happens here is once you've started the meeting, you got 6 or 7 people on the call. You're deeply into, your meeting, your discussion, and other people just kind of bop on, and you might see the little pictures come in and so forth. But if you're not paying attention, you might not know that other people have joined the meeting. So if you want to have a stronger indication that somebody's joining the meeting, what you're going to want to do is turn this on. And when you do that, you're sitting here in your meeting, and all of a sudden, somebody that you're all talking trash about suddenly joins the meeting. You're going to get a boing. You're going to get a bell that's going to tell you that someone else is joining. You're going to say, oh, we better check and see who that is. Okay. And then the question is, do you want that alert to be heard by everybody, or do you want it to be heard just by you? And that's your choice. All right, now there's another one coming up down here in a little bit that I really want to pay particular attention to, because I think this is an important one, and I did not realize that this was the case, and I think it's a good thing to change. By default, screen sharing, I'm screen sharing right now. By default, screen sharing can be initiated by all participants, right? So anybody who's in your meeting could potentially share their screen. Excuse me. What I would recommend is change it to host only. This way, as the host, you're controlling what's appearing on the screen, and nobody else can throw anything up there. So, that's a case where you're going to, if you want to avoid some whack job coming on your meeting and putting up an advertisement or, pornography or something like that. So I think that's a good one. Even me, somebody who's not so concerned about security generally, I would say that's probably a good thing to turn on. And then if someone else does need to share something, what you can do is you can make them the host, and then they can share to their heart's content. Okay. Disable this desktop and screen share for users. I am currently sharing my screen, right? So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And now you are only going to see, my camera. When you share, notice how all these options are available for sharing. I can share my screen, which would show essentially the desktop. What that means is whatever I have on the desktop is what all the participants are going to see. If I change the window that's in front of the desktop, they're going to see that change. So if you disable that screen share, it's another layer of security that prevents anybody from sharing the screen. While we're at it, let's talk about the whiteboard for a second. I'm going to share this whiteboard. Whiteboard is something that you can do drawing, you can throw a little text in there. It's sort of like just like you're in a conference room, only virtual. That's a kind of a cool feature for some users in Zoom. So what you're going to do if you don't want that whiteboard to be seen is you go down a couple more options down here. By default, participants are allowed to share a whiteboard during the meeting. you can turn that off if you should so choose. Just checking. Okay, I'm coming back on here because I forgot to reshare my screen. So you should be able to see now what we just finished talking about, which is disabling the desktop screen share for users. That is off by default. And then also we had discussed the possibility that you might want to disable the whiteboard sharing as well. All right, so now let's keep moving down here. We want to have just 2 more settings that we want to take a look at. This is one of them, allow removed participants to rejoin. So if you removed a participant, there's probably a reason why you removed them. So I would think that you'd want to turn that thing back on. I removed you. I don't want you bugging me anymore. And then finally, I want to find my way down here, all the way down to waiting room. Now, I've already turned this on. By default, when I say reset, that's going to reset it back to the default. By default, this is off. Now, we talked earlier about whether you wanted to allow users to join a meeting that the host wasn't present at yet, and how it might be something you would not want to make available to users, that you would want them to not be able to join the meeting until the host has arrived. This takes that a step further. By default, it's off, but you have the capability to turn on this waiting room. And when you do that, any user that comes into the meeting, whether the meeting is started or not, first gets put into a waiting room, just like they would in a doctor's office be put into the reception, reception room, and then be brought into the office. They go into this waiting room. You are alerted that they're in the waiting room, and then you have to manually bring them into the meeting. Again, one more level of security, one more level of control for you as the host. And that's the last one that I have that I thought was really of any particular value in terms of, for the average user, increasing their level of security. So there we go.